The house hasn't been so much as it has been kind of dumped. It slumps through the trees and down the slope to the lake shore, spilling itself along the way. I squint at it, searching for one single redeeming quality as I trudge along behind Dad, up the front path. This place looks haunted. Dad's already rapping at the front door.
Haunted by a good time, maybe. Don't be rude.
Rude to who? Casper? But the cloud that plumes out as the front door is yanked inward is no friendly ghost. Instead, it's the thickest, most impenetrable fog of weed smoke I've ever encountered. So dense, I think, I could slice a chunk off it with a knife.
Is that you, Munson?
Crawls a voice from somewhere within the cloud. And I'm starting to see a shadowy shape now. The outline of a tall man with a wild beard and cargo shorts, slumping, just like his house.
You bring me a friend?
This is my son.
Dad says.
Kid, I'd like you to meet Reefer Rick.
I'd thought that the first step in planning a heist would be more exciting. Something involving maps or schematics, or maybe a trip to a James Bondy weapons cache. I thought it might be dangerous, or at least tangible.
We'll get there.
Dad had told me as I'd wheeled the van out of the drive and into Philadelphia.
But there's an order of operations to this shit. And there's no sense in jumping straight in if we don't have a buyer lined up on the other side.
I don't know what I'd expected from the word buyer. But it wasn't anything like the beaming, friendly face I'm looking up into now. Reefer Rick is a giant of a guy, with big smiling eyes, and a t-shirt printed with a faded Smokey the Bear, and the words, "Save our forests."
Munson Jr.
Rick exclaims, grabbing my hand and pumping it in a handshake so exuberant that it joggles my shoulder in its socket.
I feel like I'm meeting royalty right now.
It's just Eddie, I say through my clattering teeth. There's no sign that Rick's actually heard me.
Come the heck on in.
He says, shuffling back to let us pass through the door.
Welcome to the Reefer residence.
I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's Rick's overwhelming friendliness. But I scrape my shoes against the sill as I step inside, hyper-conscious of tracking mud into the house. Maybe I've been watching too many movies, but when Dad told me, find something dark and dready. Instead, the space we step into is open and bright, though the low-hanging haze of smoke turns the sunlight into kind of an orange blur. It's not orderly by any means, but it's certainly not messy. There's no film of dust, no sticky spills, and the scattering of beer cans and dirty plates I can see all look to be no more than 2 days old. In my book, the book of a teenager who's been living on his own for months, this is practically a drill sergeant of level of hygiene. A regimented line of bright blue pill bottles stands at attention on a side table, and Dad taps the lid of one of them as we pass.
Branching out. What are these, bennies?
Times are hard, my friend.
Rick tells him, not breaking his shuffling stride.
I'm here to lighten loads and brighten days, not pass judgment.
Rick's bed sits, unmade, between a couple of wide windows along the far wall, but the majority of the space is gobbled up by a hulking pool table. This is where Rick heads now, shuffling in his slippers towards the pool cue that's been discarded against a rickety china hutch.
You play?
He asks me, picking up the cue. I shrug, a little.
Right on.
He hands the cue to me and produces another one from somewhere beneath an overstuffed floral sofa, straightening with a loud grunt.
Don't get old.
He tells me. He can't be more than 35, but I nod. I'll keep that in mind.
How you've been, Rick?
Dad asks. He moves a stack of old magazines off an armchair and settles in, leaning as far back into the plushy cushions as he can.
Shh.
Rick says, eyes sharp as he fills a beat-up rack with pool balls. They clack against one another, nestling tighter and tighter as he goes.
You want a break?
Is it possible for this conversation to head off the rails if it was never on them in the first place? I don't care, I say. Sure.
Be my guest.
He removes the rack with a flourish, stepping back from the table and hanging off his pool cue like a walking stick. I shoot Dad an uncertain look.
Break if you're gonna break.
Dad says. I guess I'm gonna break. It takes 2 seconds to line up my shot. Then there's a loud thunk, and the balls are splitting every which way, so chaotically that I can credit the green 6 that plummets into a pocket, only to dumb luck.
Solids.
Rick nods his approval like this is something I've done on purpose.
Excellent choice. Nah, I've been awesome, man.
It takes me a second to realize that he's talking to Dad, answering his earlier question.
Just chilling, you know. Business is good. Life is better.
I'm glad to hear it.
Dad says, line up my next shot.
I gotta admit, I was worried when I didn't hear from you.
Rick says,
2 years radio silence? Those were some dark thoughts that started creeping in. I'm very glad to see you're still walking around.
You know it takes more than one dumbass enforcer to keep me down.
thunk. I sink another ball. Rick is watching Dad when I look up, hazy insight burning in his bloodshot eyes. For his part, Dad doesn't seem bothered. He just lounges back in the armchair, hands clasped behind his head, like this is his house and not Rick's.
Sure,
Rick finally says.
I know that.
My next stroke scratches. Damn, I say, straightening up. Your turn,
Speaking of business,
Dad says as Rick chalks up the tip of his cue.
Eddie and we've stumbled upon something of an opportunity we think might interest you.
Mm-hmm.
Rick is squinting down the length of his cue, angling a shot for the 12 ball near the far corner.
In a few weeks, we're going to come into possession of, call it 20 pounds of weed. I'm not talking backyard shit. No seeds and stems. More like 20 beautiful pounds of golden ambrosia. All the way from Oregon.
Why are you telling me this, man?
Rick asks, thunk. The 12 disappears into the pocket, and Rick rotates around the table, his eye on the 15 that's been tucked up behind a wall of solids.
Why do you think?
Dad asks. Rick just bites the inside of his cheek and crouches to the same level as the table.
I think you want me to buy it off you.
Rick says, and then his shoulders jerking. And the cue is twitching, and the cue ball is doing an improbable hop over the line of defenders, smacking into the 15 and sinking it out of sight.
For
Dad's easygoing mask has thinned, the tension underneath starting to poke through.
15,000.
15,000 for 20 pounds of golden ambrosia.
Rick whistles low, but he's still not looking up from the table.
Quite a deal you're cutting me. I'd have to be a moron to pass that up.
So don't be a moron.
Dad stands, the armchair creaking beneath him.
Come on, Rick. Have I ever led you wrong before?
Now Rick glances towards him, and the look on his face says that Dad really doesn't want him to answer that question, honestly. Dad was in lockup. I blurt the words out without really meaning to. The only thought in my mind is that, for some reason, this little meeting seems to be going not so great. And if Dad isn't going to explain his way out of it, then I should give it my best shot. In case you're wondering why you didn't hear from him, it's because he got arrested. In Colorado. Rick turns his easygoing smile towards me.
I never want to wonder why. Al Munson's disappeared off the face of the planet, Junior.
He says,
Are you?
yes, no, I don't know. Then what's the holdup? I ask. Rick snorts. With barely a glance at the table, he lines up and sinks another shot, and I step back so he can do it again, rambling all the while. You said it yourself. This is a sweet deal. We do all the work. You get the product. You could get rich off 20 pounds. All you have to do is say yes. Rick lolls his chin on the tip of his cue.
And then what? We do our business, we hit the happily ever after, then what?
I don't,
It's a rhetorical question, Guy.
Rick says.
I know the answer. Then the problem of where did Munson and company steal the shit from in the first place becomes my problem when the wolves chase me down. I'll be sitting here, living my life, getting by, and all of a sudden, a couple guys come knocking on my door, asking me where their weed is, and when it's already gone, what happens to me?
I don't have any answer for him, so he just shakes head.
Nothing good, I'll tell you that much.
That's not gonna happen.
Dad says.
Whatever you say, dude.
Rick's tone is agreeable, but his eyes roll is not. He takes another shot at the pool table. This one misses.
Think about it, Rick.
Dad says, sauntering up beside me and taking my cue.
There's no way in hell this could ever trace back to you. When Eddie and I grab the shit,
Don't tell me who you're getting it from.
Rick cautions.
our mysterious benefactor won't even know it's gone until it's too late. They won't know who we are or where the weed went missing. Maybe they didn't even have a full payload to begin with. Who's to say? But at no point is anyone going to hear your name or see your face.
Dad's not taking a shot, which means we're effectively at a standstill. Rick twirls his cue between his fingers, studying the spread of the balls across the green felt. He still doesn't look convinced. He's never going to be convinced. Not by Dad. Not by the guy with a track record of evaporating into the night and, if my read is right, leaving Rick hanging high and dry. This plan is DOA, dried up before it had a chance to bloom. Goodbye, WR Records. Goodbye, LA. Goodbye, Page Warner. I'm mid-spiral when the weirdest memory hits me, so vividly that it practically walks up and taps me on the shoulder. One punch for every $1 you owe me. That's what Tommy H. had said. And then Gareth had spat a curse at him, and Tommy's face had plunged deep purple. After that, he hadn't cared about whatever stupid milk money Gareth might have had on him. He'd just wanted the kid to hurt. It's not going to trace back to you, I say, echoing Dad, because they're not going to care about you. Rick's got his chin perched on the end of his pool cue, and he squints at me through the haze sunlight.
How do you figure that?
I reach out to poke at the cue ball, bouncing it off the rail with my finger. If they figure out who stole from them, they'll be pissed, right? But pissed at Dad, pissed at me. They might come after us for the money, but what they'll really be looking for is revenge is their pride. You're not a part of that. You're just like a random lucky bystander. If there's any shrapnel, you won't be the one catching it. I take the cue back from Dad, line up a shot, and hope to hell I make it. Because this speech is going to seem a lot less cool if I don't. Of course, if that all still feels too risky for you, we'll just go somewhere else. You're not the only supplier in Indiana. You're just the closest. Click. I hit and straighten to face Rick before I can see whether my shot has landed. My heart is hammering in my chest, but I screw my best Al Munson smile onto my face and keep it there. Rick watches me for a long beat. Then, all at once, he starts to laugh. It's loud and goofy, bubbling from somewhere deep in his chest.
Damn, Junior,
He says.
you're a hell of a salesman. I almost believed that.
Dad claps me on my back. I can feel how clammy his palm is through my shirt.
He's really something, huh?
I'll tell you what. Whatever you got cooking up with your old man goes south. You come to me for a job. I'll set you up good.
And before then, Rick's still chuckling as he digs the end of a joint out of his cargo shorts pocket and sparks it.
It's 20 pounds of golden ambrosia.
He says through a mouthful of smoke.
What am I gonna do? Pass it up. You bring it here. I'll take it off your hands.
Relief swamps me in a wave. Maybe I don't have to dismiss my California dream just yet. Pleasure doing business with you, Rick.
Pleasure is the business.
Rick says, leaning down to take the next shot.
And don't you forget it.